I also want to ask you about someone else that you share a building with at TalkSport who has become a broadcasting legend, and that's Ally McCoist. And you've watched close at hand as Ally's, reputation as a journalist and a broadcaster has really grown.
Yeah, it's fabulous, Simon. I saw him this morning in the building. Jordan and I go into the studio as Jeff Stelling and Ally come out. And I've known Stelling for years. I say hi to Jeff. McCoist, always a big embrace. Always, how you doing? He's terrific. I have to say, he's as well known down here as he is up in Glasgow, the west of Scotland, central belt of Scotland. He's incredible. The one wonderful thing about Ally McCoist, Simon, there are many wonderful aspects about Ally. To a degree, he's like Frank McAvennie. Never changes. No. He's always the same. What you see is what you get. Never tries to be anything other than what he is. And that's a very hospitable, friendly, honest guy. And he's great. He's terrific. And by God, is he popular. But he's multifaceted. He's become one of the best co-commentators around. If he's co-commentating on a live game, Ally trends on Twitter. He's great. He's wonderful. And one thing I will never forget him for, Simon, Jordan and I went on 10 to 1 one day down the road there at TalkSport. And Ally had been on that morning and had come off air. And the sad news came through about the passing of Walter Smith. And Ally was extremely upset in another room. And I knew he was still in the building. But during a commercial break, Simon, I went through to him and I said, look, if you can find a way of coming back into the studio and joining me and Simon and talking about Walter, and I know it's tough, and I totally understand if you can't do it, but if you want to do it, the offer's there. Come through and join us. If not, I totally get it. And about 25 minutes later, the door opens to the studio, and during a commercial break, Ally came in and he sat with us, and I think he spoke for about half an hour about Walter and what Walter meant to him. And I'll never forget his words that day, Simon. He was incredible. And he summoned up the courage and the strength to do it. And it was amazing. Yeah. And he was shattered sitting there. He was shattered by the news that his great friend and former boss had passed away. But he did it. And I've never forgotten him for it. And I love McCoist. I love McAvennie. Special guys.
Let's talk about your big transfer deadline, your big transfer day, even from Scotland down to England, from Sky. I mean, everyone recognises you from Sky's transfer deadline day, Sky Sports News. What age would you have been at that point? Can you remember?
That's a good question, Simon. So it was some years later. I was at the World Cup in France in 1998. So I was late 30s, coming up 40. And I'd been speaking to Sky, I must be honest. I'd been speaking to them. And at the World Cup, I was thinking, it's a good time to make a move. I was covering the finals for Scottish TV, and the opportunity came along. But I've got to tell you, Simon, you always get a break. And I must admit, this was my break. In that year, building up to the World Cup finals in France, Dick Advocaat, if you remember, he'd been appointed the Rangers manager. And I remember Rangers at that time saying he's still with PSV Eindhoven. No one should go out to Holland because he's not going to do anything until he comes to Scotland. And that'll be at the end of the season, the domestic season. And then he'll speak to the Scottish media. But I decided, no, I'm going to go out there. And I got a cameraman, an ITN cameraman in Amsterdam. And I met him. And Advocaat and PSV Eindhoven were playing a club called Den Bosch in Holland. And I pitched up, and Advocaat said, no, you shouldn't have come. No interview. I'm not going to speak until I get to Glasgow. And I said, well, surely you can do something for me. And he said, well, yeah, I made it clear. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, look, we're playing Den Bosch. It's going to be a very tight game in the Dutch Cup. If we win, I'll give you an interview. If we don't, no interview. Is that fair? And I looked at Advocaat and I thought, God, he means it. Anyway, it went to the golden goal, and PSV Eindhoven, who had the likes of Arthur Newman, Jaap Stam playing for them, a Brazilian cropped up called Claudio, put the ball in the back of the Den Bosch net. They won, and Advocaat said, okay, you win. I'll give you your interview. And I know that was such a break for me, because I was the only guy that got the interview with Advocat before he came to Scotland to take over at Rangers. And he was a man of his word, and he did it for me. And that kind of, Sky said to me, we were pretty impressed at how you got that interview with Dick Advocat, but it was pure luck more than judgment. But it helped. And that was a big break. And you know what it's like, Simon, in our game. It was a break that helped me.
Well, yeah, I was actually going to go back a little bit and then come back to your Sky days, but I remember watching you in action close at hand, and you secured a great interview, big exclusive with Paul Gascoigne when he was living in Renfrewshire as well, and we were all there, the press pack were all there, and you managed to secure the deal. I'm pretty sure you had to speak to him through his intercom initially before he said, all right, come up the driveway, Jim.
Yeah, I remember that. You know, Simon, to this day, I still feel a bit guilty to this day, because the press back outside his house, and we were part of it. And we're all trying to get the poor guy to speak. And, you know, Gazza, everywhere he went, he got attention, everywhere he went. You to a degree as well, Frank. I mean, you were always big news because you were a big name in the Scottish game. And then, of course, West Ham, and you became even bigger, then came back to Celtic. But, you know, I remember standing outside there, and I made it clear to Gazza, look, if you speak to me, I'll be very grateful. I do remember Simon getting in, like the intercom, and he's like, who is it? I said, Jim White, I've got a camera crew, can you let me in, Paul? And the intercom, the gates opened, in we went. And not long after I spoke to Gascoigne, Jimmy Five Bellies was in the house, and he had the phone to his ear, and he said, Jim, it's for you. I'm like, really? And I said, yeah, hi. And and this voice came on. I knew right away who it was. Jim, it's Walter Smith. How are you? I said, yeah, fine. Where are you? I said, I'm in Gazza's house. He said, I know. Get out. I always remember it. But I managed to get a few words with Gazza before then. But Walter made no bones about it. You shouldn't be in there. Get out. Leave him be. But you know what the game was like, Simon? We're all trying to get the same interviews. Everybody trying to get exclusives. And I was one of them. I was no different. Every now and again, I speak to Gazza. He came on one day, the early days of me being on TalkSport, and he paid tribute to the late great Ray Wilkins. I've never forgotten him for that as well. So if you ask Gazza to do something, by and large, he does it. He's a great guy. He was then, he still is now.
I got a lot of time for Paul. I thought in '91, I thought he was the best player in the world, Jim.
Yeah.
At that time, I thought he was super. And if truth be told, I hope it's a true story, but I heard that when he was going to Rangers, Walter went out to Lazio, went out to Italy, and the gates opened and all that, and he says, who is it? And Walter Smith. So Gazza went out and says, what do you want? He says, I want to see if you'll come to Rangers. And apparently Gazza says, yeah, and jumped in a quad bike and drove away.
Brilliant.
And Walter's going, what the fuck am I going to do now? So his pals were playing PlayStation, and he came back and he says, what are you doing still here? He says, well, what's the terms? He said, I told you I'd sign. And that's how easy it was. Brilliant.
Brilliant. I mean, I can remember him again. I think I was doing some work for Radio Clyde with Paul Cooney. And Paul said to me, get a radio pack on and try and get behind the scenes after one of the matches Gazza played for Rangers at Ibrox. And he was coming up the tunnel. I don't know how he got into the tunnel, Frank. And Gazza came up and he stops. And they came to me live, and I'm like, well done, Paul. God, star of the show yet again today, blah, blah, blah. And towards the end of it, I said, and now Motherwell. And he said, yeah, my mother's well. Yeah, she's very well. You know, you could never second guess what he was going to say, but tremendous entertainer on and off the pitch. A wonderful guy.
Yeah, I'm so glad he's still about, because the world's better for him being about. I love him to death. He's a global superstar, as you say. I mean, he's like, very few people go to Italy like he did, you know. And it's great. And you're talking about Ray Wilkins. I played against him at Rangers. Well, he is. And all of a sudden, you try something and Ray's going, unlucky, Frank. And I was like that. See, taking the piss? Because it's an old firm game.
Aye.
And he's going, keep going. And it was like, he loved football. What a gentleman he was. And he just loved football guy. And he loved people trying things. And, you know, I thought, wow. So I was heartbroken when he left us. It was a shame.
Oh, yeah, that affected me quite badly, Frank. Mm-hmm. I got to know him down here pretty well. I knew him up in Glasgow. At the time he signed, at the time Souness signed him, Frank, I was on the sauce then. And I remember being out at Glasgow Airport. He was coming in from Paris. And I was in the bar at Glasgow Airport, missed his arrival. Had to go back out to Ibrox back round to Ibrox from the airport, go in, and I said to him, we missed you. Would you mind, Ray, as if you're arriving at Ibrox, can you go up the end of the street and walk in the front door so we can get the establishing shot of you arriving? And he said, yeah, of course I'll do that for you. I mean, I was so embarrassed about it. It should never have happened. But that's the sort of guy Ray Wilkins was. Mm-hmm. If he could help you, Frank, he would help you. And he did.
Well, you talking about Glasgow Airport, I don't know if you remember this. You'd done it with me when I was leaving Celtic, and I was to go down and speak to Arsenal and West Ham. And I was heartbroken because I didn't want, when I signed for Celtic, I thought I was signing for my career. I thought I'd be there till it finished. And obviously, politics, I didn't get paid and all that kind of stuff. But I was in tears, and you had a camera crew, and you told me to switch it off, and because I'm sitting in the corner crying. And I thought, thank you very much, this wee boy bubbling in the corner.
No, I remember it, Frank. I remember at the time you were heartbroken, because I can remember the relationship you'd struck up with the Celtic fans. Yeah. They absolutely loved you, and you loved them, and it was such a big moment for you. And I do remember that. We didn't want to put you under pressure. But Frank, I may say, in all your time that I've known you, you've been absolutely top drawer to deal with, so cooperative, so decent to deal with. But the main thing is you've always just been Frank McAvennie, mate. You've never tried to be anything you're not. What you are is a wonderful footballer and a brilliant person. But you've been brilliant to deal with. And, the very fact that you and I are doing this just now with Simon, it means a lot to me, and I hope it does to you as well, because it means our friendship has lasted so long.
Oh, it's superb. Thank you very much.
That's a wonderful, a lovely tribute, Jim. That's really nice. Mm-hmm. I'm filling up. Fantastic. But he is, listen, I know without everybody kind of blowing smoke and all that stuff, it is true though. I mean, there's a genuine affection for Frank. We've managed to get some guests onto this podcast that I would never have dreamed of being able to get into the studio or on via Zoom, and they all say the same thing. For Frank, I'd walk a million miles.
Well, this is the effect you have on people, Frank. You've always just been the same guy who, I mean, am I right? You're always so grateful for the opportunity you were given. And not only Simon is he a hero up there with the Celtic fans, I've said this before, I often get in a taxi down here and the cab driver will be West Ham. And I mentioned Frank McAvennie, and off that cab driver will go. Love him. Him and Tony Cotty. Him and Cotty. Love Frank McAvennie. Love him. Honestly, you're much loved down here, Frank, as well.
I know, mate. I know.